Hey there, my name is Gary Sims and this is Gary Explained. Now the display is the most common way that we interact with electronics. You know, televisions, monitors for example, but not only those. Think about it, even an oven has got a display on it, your clock has got a display on it, your watch, the infotainment system inside of your car, the list just goes on and on and on. Now, if you're building a project with a Raspberry Pi Pico, you may want to add a display. And there are lots of different ways of doing that. One is to use the Pico Display from Pi. This is not a sponsored video, by the way. Now, it's got 4 tactile buttons. It's got the little display. It's also got an RGB LED. It can be programmed from C as well as from MicroPython. So I bought one and I've had a look at it. So if you want to find out more, please let me explain. Okay, so here is the Pico display itself. As you can see, it's basically a little hat hardware attachment that you can put on top of the Raspberry Pi Pico. Here you can see the connector for the pins, and I'll connect it up and show you that in a minute. Basically, you get this 1.14 inch display. It's a 240 by 135 IPS display, plus you get an RGB LED here, plus you get these 4 buttons. So you've got display, LED and 4 buttons all in one package. So it's really a great way to add kind of interactivity to a Raspberry Pi Pico application. You can interact with it with buttons, it can interact with you with the display, and it can interact with you using the RGB. And so that's a really good way of, you know, taking a very simple app that you want to build and then putting it straight onto here. And it doesn't cost very much money. I paid about £13.50 plus shipping. It comes from Pi. They ship, they're a UK company, but they do ship worldwide. And this is not a sponsored video because I bought this with my own cash. Okay, so let's see how you connect up to a Raspberry Pi Pico. It's pretty simple. If we look here, we've got a Raspberry Pi Pico, and I've got the headers connected to it, so you can see those headers soldered in there very easily. And then when you turn this over here, you can see that it shows you the picture there of where the USB should be, so you know which way around to put it. So basically this goes into here by connecting the USB like that, and there you go, it is fully connected. And so now you have this little brick, as it were, a combination of the Raspberry Pi Pico together with a Raspberry Pi Pico display, and you can then power it up using a USB, which I'll show you in a minute, to show you some of the demos you can get. Now you can program this using MicroPython and C or C++, and I'll show you some MicroPython demos now. Okay, so the first demo, let's look at the buttons. As you can see, it's got A, B, and X and Y on it, and this is basically a little program that tells you what button you press. So press any button. So we'll press this one here, button Y pressed, and it goes back. Button X pressed, okay, button B pressed, and button A pressed. So you can see pretty simple, but just shows you from within inside MicroPython you can actually use the buttons. And of course this would be great for making a small game that can play there on the LED. You've kind of got some buttons to interact with that game. So talking of games, this demo here just shows you how well it can handle the display. Of course, remembering the Pico is not a slouch really, even though it's a microcontroller, and you can have all those balls bouncing around on the screen. They're different sizes, different dimensions, some of them behind other ones, and that looks pretty smooth to me. So there you go, you could easily get a game running on that, as I said a moment ago, with different sprites flying around the screen, and you could use the buttons and so on to actually control the game that you're building. And this quick demo here just shows you all the different colors that you can display here on the Pico display. And notice that the LED, because it's an RGB LED, doesn't just flash red or green, it can change its color. It's actually matching approximately the color. Look at that, going to a blue, the color on the screen and the color on the LED. It doesn't show up as well on the camera, it looks much brighter, but that actually, you can just see the halo around there. You can just see the color it's changing to, but in real life it's actually much closer than what the camera is able to capture here. And if you remember when I did the review of the Badger 2040, I had a 3D cube rotating on the screen on that e-ink display. Well, I took the same code again, and this time I ported it to the Pico display. So there we have wireframe, 3D cube, and this time I added an extra dimension. It goes back and forth as well, changing the distance away from the observer. This code will be in my GitHub repository if you want to play with it. And here's another little demo. This is a temperature monitor. So the Raspberry Pi Pico has an internal temperature sensor. It's reading that sensor and then plotting every few moments the temperature along the graph here. I notice that the LED here is also reflecting the color that's on here, and the program set that if it's very, very hot, very, very cold, this can change to kind of blue and red, and the LED changes as well. So a very simple idea of a temperature monitor, you know, here using the Raspberry Pi Pico and the Pico Display. Okay, that's it. That's my quick look at the Pico Display. I hope you found that useful. If you did, please do give this video a thumbs up. If you like these kind of videos, why not stick around by subscribing to the channel? Don't forget you can follow me on Twitter at Gary Explains, and I also have a monthly newsletter. Go over to GaryExplains.com, type in your email address, no spam, but you will get the newsletter. Okay, that's it. I'll see you in the next one.